Hi there. What we're going to talk about today is firm theory, which is our next topic in microeconomics. So, we asked the question, how much would you pay for a cup of coffee in order to understand more about demand, right? What we learned, of course, is that to maximize demand, you have to mess around with elasticity and your price. But then towards the end of that topic, you learn that you can't necessarily just maximize revenue. It might not be where you maximize profit. So now we're going to add the question. This whole unit is basically adding the question, how much would you actually sell it for? So given what people would pay, how much could you or would you sell it for based on your personal firm's situation? So we spent the last topic looking at markets and market demand. We're going to spend a lot of time in this unit looking at individual firm cost. And the reason, quite simply, is that not only do some costs not behave like others, but none of them behave like revenue or demand. For instance, most people with no understanding of business or economics would think that, well, if I want to do what she's doing and make more money, I just need to sell more stuff, right? Wrong. Don't feel bad, you're not alone. It's not intuitive. Most people would figure that if you sell more stuff, you'll make more profit. It's not necessarily true though. And that brings it back to my point, that this unit is about two things. The first is that I learned how costs and revenue behave when put together in economics. I didn't learn it in my accounting classes, I didn't learn it in my finance classes, I didn't even learn it in my management policy classes. I learned it in economics, and so too shall you. Second, from a purely academic point of view on the social science subject of economics, this unit is where you're going to really learn how to answer the second fundamental question. In other words, how do you produce? How much? With what resources? On what scale of production? Right? And that's essentially because this unit has virtually everything that there is to do about classical economics that it could possibly have. This chap that you're looking at right now is Adam Smith. And in the year 1776, he wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, which incidentally is right when the United States was forming as a country, which is why these notions of competition and the market deciding are as much a part of the American way of life and the American system of government and the American economy as they are a part of this book and a part of this unit. So, without further ado, what we're going to talk about is essentially going to allow you to do this with your theoretical knowledge, right? You will be able to understand economic situations, hopefully, and be able to come up with some kind of draw conclusions about them when you read about them or hear about them. And the reason is, you hopefully by the end of this topic will understand different characteristics of a market structure. You even know what a market structure is, right? Different degrees of competition and what it actually means for output and cost and profit. But before you do that, you have to actually understand something about these different market structures. In other words, the various degrees of competitiveness. So that's what we're going to do, and hopefully by the end, this is how you're going to be able to use it. So, here we go. Firm theory, or the theory of the firm, whatever you want to call it. The first thing we're going to do before you get started is a quick overview, and then we're going to let you get to it. So the first thing you have to understand is that now we are dealing with a firm. So the demand line of a firm is very different than the demand line of a market, right? Over here on the left is what we talked about in our last topic. In the law of supply and demand, we looked at the supply for the whole market and the demand for the whole market. Now we're going to be looking at just the demand. When we talk about demand, it's just going to be the demand for one firm. Down here, these terms you should know. If you don't, look them up. Wikipedia, Investopedia, just on Google, whatever. They're straightforward terms. They will help you kind of follow along with what people are saying if you don't know what they are. What we need to clarify quickly next is this notion of profit. When an accounting student or an accountant says profit, what they mean is you're going to take all your revenues, right? And after you subtract your costs, you're left with profit, right? Your net change to your wealth, to your net worth, to your equity if you've taken accounting. But in economics, it's slightly different. It's all those costs, but in addition, it's opportunity cost. And remember, opportunity cost is how much you could have made if you select the next best alternative, right? So if you're making $1 million accounting profit. But the second opportunity you passed up, you could have made $700,000 profit. Then your $1 million of accounting profit here, its economic profit is only $300,000 because you're only beating the next best alternative by $300,000. So when we talk about profit in this unit, we mean economic profit. So without any further ado, here's what you need to keep in mind. You're trying to answer these questions. In other words, how does a firm's revenue behave given the size of the firm and the degree of competitiveness in that firm's market structure? Second, how do the firm's costs behave, and are they different from one another? And lastly, when you put it all together, when you change a firm's level of output, how does that change revenue, cost, and therefore profit for that firm? Because you'll find that depending on the degree of competitiveness of a market, the answers to those questions are going to be different.